It's Matthew Holt. I'm thrilled to be here with Kyna Fong. Kyna was a Stanford, I think you were a Stanford Business School professor, was that right? Economics professor who decided to leave and start an EMR company, which maybe we need some Stanford psychiatry professors on the interview to tell us how that went. But Kyna, you are the CEO of Elation Health, which is a new kind of, you've been talking about it and showing the health to go for a little while now. It's a new kind of electronic health record company. So tell me a bit about the origins of why you did this and why you think Elation Health is different. And then we'll talk a bit about how the company's grown.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm the, as you mentioned, co-founder, CEO of Elation Health. We're based in San Francisco. We started the company. So I started the company with my brother, and we started it based on experiences we had growing up running our father's primary care practice. And so we actually spent about 10 years creating, running, and managing his practice when we were kids, and that sort of fed into our decisions to go into healthcare as we entered our professional careers. And so, as you mentioned, prior to starting Elation, I was an economics professor. I studied game theory applied to healthcare and was just really passionate about helping transform the healthcare system, over the course of my career. And then Kyna, who is my brother and co-founder, was actually a management consultant doing health IT strategy and implementation work. And so starting Elation was really kind of a very natural and almost accidental process of trying to pull technology into our father's practice, looking at all the options, getting frustrated that anything would either cause us to have to hire more staff or see fewer patients, neither of which were tenable options for us. And then, Kyna and I just started building out the product, or a product, did it in our father's practice, and kind of the rest is history. Started putting together wireframes, putting together something that we could put in front of other physicians and get their feedback. And our focus was really on the notion of how do we build something that's intuitive enough for physicians that they can continue to focus on the patient, because our mission as a company is to strengthen the relationship between physicians and patients. We think that's the heart of what healthcare is, and we want to enable phenomenal care for all patients in the healthcare system. So that's kind of a brief overview of how we started the company and why we started the company. It's been a great ride, and I think that especially with all the changes happening in the healthcare system today, technology is a huge opportunity to really facilitate and drive things forward.
So let's briefly talk about what's happened since you started, and then let's dive a bit into that sort of main tenet of building a different user experience. But so when did you actually start it? And then you raised a bit of money to start, and a lot more earlier this year. So give me a sense about when you started, how many people you were at the start, how much money you raised to this point, and where you are on the sort of client-based side. Just get that stuff out of the way.
Yeah. So Kyna and I started the company in 2010. That was when we started, just building out the product. And we were very heads down on product development the first few years. It was really about working closely with physicians of all different sorts, although a big focus of ours was primary care physicians or physicians with longitudinal relationships with their patients. Spent a lot of time doing that, and I'd say a couple of years ago really brought the product to market in terms of making it available for any physicians out there. And so, as you mentioned, we raised our Series B of funding earlier this year, and now that was $15 million there. And now we're a team of roughly 50 people and continuing to grow.
And how many clinicians, I don't know, people count this in different ways, whether it's practices or individual providers or clinicians who are touching the system, but where are you in terms of growth and for numbers of doctors using the tool?
Yeah. So we have over 15,000 clinical users across every state in the country on our platform today. So it's been a lot of growth since.
Give me a sense of your growth there, because obviously from nothing to that is pretty fast. But give me a sense of how many you're adding and how that works.
Yeah. So I would say, we're in the, several 100% growth year over year. That's just been the trajectory the past couple of years. And obviously, as we're growing and maturing as a company, we're looking to maintain the growth rate, but also continue to deliver, that core quality experience that has enabled us to be successful so far.
And you mentioned primary care docs. I believe your father was either a solo practice or a small practice. Practice. Has there been a focus on that end of the market, or are you just looking to scale to larger practices? Or give me a sense of your sweet spot in terms of customers.
Yeah. So I'd say that the majority of our customers end up operating in practices that are call it 15 physicians or fewer. Definitely on the small practice end. We've been continuing. The interesting thing is that even as you move to larger groups and associations and health systems, they are actually delivering care in these same types of practices. That they end up being in 10 to 15 physician or 10 to 15 or fewer physician practices. And so I think our core competencies of being able to work effectively in those types of clinics also it opens up the door for us to serve large organizations. So we've been doing that. We've been, working with larger organizations over the past couple of years and been successful in that.
Okay, so let's dive into a bit of the issues of what's wrong with the standard, and there's been a lot written about this, right? So Bob Wachter wrote the digital doctor book. There's been a ton of back and forth. I've been chatting with the AMA about this. What's wrong with the current set of EMRs? Why are they so hard to use? And when you had that issue, you looked at a whole bunch of them and said, "What can I do to help my dad? Let's practice." And got to the point where you decided to actually build one yourself. What was it that you felt was the thing that you were going to fix? So what's special about Elation that you felt that maybe differentiates you on that usability issue from the pack?
Yeah. I think at the heart of it's very simple. Most of these systems are built for billing or administrative or compliance purposes, essentially built for something outside of what the physician cares about or does. And we saw that as a huge drawback of these systems. And instead, what we did with Elation from the get-go is to build products that put the clinical needs first and are focused on bringing physicians and patients closer together, like recognizing that healthcare is ultimately a human relationship between physicians and patients. And use this approach. We call this approach clinical first. And I think that foundation has really allowed us to tackle, the issues of usability, but not only that, also the issues of engagement at the point of care, and a tool that physicians use not because they feel like a gun is to their head and they have to fill information in, but rather a tool that they feel makes them more productive and makes them more effective at doing the work that they care about, which is caring for patients. So, at the heart of it, it's maybe it's not rocket science, but I think that that focus on clinical and the clinical needs and optimizing for that rather than billing or administrative concerns has really allowed us to differentiate. And, we have a customer satisfaction score, like our NPS is on par with Apple and Amazon. It's something we're very proud of. Whereas in this space, it's pretty common to have a negative NPS score, where more people are explicitly, unhappy with the product rather than actually promoting it. So that's great to hear. I guess that let me go a little bit deeper on that. So I don't think you'd find a single electronic medical record company, including the giants, who say, "Oh no, we're set up here just to do admin and billing." Now many of them came out of that background. We understand it's hard to shed your legacy. Everyone in America has to deal with billing, and you've got Medicare and Medicaid and hundreds of insurance companies, et cetera, et cetera. It's not like you can ignore that. Right. So
what about the particular approach or the interface or the clinical style that you used? What about it that you think was different than most of the market?
Yeah. I'd say that, we, from the get-go, the way we viewed the EMR or the tool was not just as a static data repository. And I think that that's how a lot of EMRs think of themselves, is it's for inputting information, it's for documentation. And any of the work they do around usability still center around documenting, like putting information in. Instead, the way that we thought about it was actually as a tool, and hopefully the most important tool that a physician had in their toolkit to care for a patient. So it's not just the documentation, but even more so, how do you actually see the story of the patient's health? How do you quickly understand where you should focus with the patient? And how does the system present information to you that allows you to make better, more accurate, and more informed decisions? And I think that view of the product as more a way to engage and support the actual delivery of care, as opposed to a tool that's just to hold records, which is what the name traditionally implies, right? Just a data repository. I think that bigger vision and expectation for the product definitely differentiates as well.
Okay, so hopefully by the magic of the internet and television, you're going to be able to show us a brief demo of some of the examples. So try and grab hold of the screen if you can. It's down below. Sure. And then perhaps you could bring up a couple of examples and show us a quick demo.
Yeah, I will do that for you. So. Screen. Okay.
All right.
Great. So I'll just walk you through kind of a very, very quick high-level demo here. So Elation has 2 pages. That's all a physician has to learn to be able to use the system to care for patients, which is why our physicians are able to see patients using Elation after less than an hour with the system. There's a very simple overview here. So this page that I'm showing you is the practice home. This is the main homepage for the physician when they come into Elation. So it has a scheduler, it has the ability to search for patients, and then it has this requiring actions queue, which is a personal up-to-date inbox of anything that needs the physician's attention. So you see here, this is the first page. And the second page, which is where I'll really spend the majority of time here, is the patient chart. So here is Sally patient, who is a patient that I've been seeing for quite some time. If you'll notice on the left-hand side here, there is a very familiar view to physicians who've seen paper charts in the past. So this left-hand side is the patient's clinical profile, which is quickly and easily referenceable key information about the patient, like allergies, problem lists, history, medications, etc. And then the right-hand side is really like that bulk, thick part of the patient's chart that just contains everything in the patient's history. So we call this the chronological record. And it's a chronology of all information in the patient's history, including lab results, notes, messages, prescriptions, reports, you name it. And the neat thing about this chronological record is that you can either scroll through it and kind of see a history of everything that's gone on with the patient over time, like visit notes, labs, referrals, orders, etc. And you can also use this search bar, which is something that our physicians really appreciate. So I can do anything from just searching for notes and finding all the notes that I've written for this patient in the past, to doing more advanced searches, like say I'm interested in the glucose level for this patient. I type in glucose and immediately a table comes up that has not only the most recent glucose results for this patient, but also things like hemoglobin A1Cs, which the system is smart enough to recognize. If a physician's looking for glucose, they're also interested in the A1Cs. And if I see something here that's abnormal, all I need to do is click on that, and I can quickly see the original lab report that presented those abnormal results and get more context there. So this is one of the ways in which we make it really easy to digest information and really get a story of what's been going on with the patient, with the trending of the values and being easily able to jump from the lab value trends to the original report, and then being able to compare it against past notes for the patient. So I want to show you something that is one of the neat new features of Elation, which is the ability to share information with other providers who are also caring for the patient, even though those providers may not be, in the same practice or in the same health system as I am. So in this case, if I search for all sharing providers, you'll notice that I can actually view reports from, in this case, Dr. Turk, who is another physician caring for Sally patient in another practice. So I can actually pull up reports from Dr. Turk and orders that I wouldn't otherwise have access to. So that's something that that has been really time savings for our physicians.
And where are those coming from?
So these are other, it comes from Dr. Turk, who in this case is another provider on the Elation platform.
Oh, sorry. So he's on the Elation platform too. So you're doing across, this is within the Elation platform.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so I can also, not only can I look at documents that Dr. Turk has shared with me, I can also look at the clinical profile of Dr. Turk and see if there's anything different between the clinical profile he has and the clinical profile that I have. So in this case, as I look at Dr. Turk's clinical profile, I can see that actually the past medical history is documented a new ACL surgery that I don't have. So what I can do is I just import that, click right there, and notice it shows up right inside my past medical history for my future reference. And so that's how we're able to enable collaboration between providers who are seeing mutual patients and are on the same care team. The final thing that might be helpful to give you a quick tour of is the ability to document efficiently and intelligently. So I've just pulled up a visit note here for Sally patient as if I were seeing the patient directly. I have decision support that I can decide whether to act upon for Sally patient. And even more importantly, as I'm seeing Sally patient or preparing to see Sally patient, I can very quickly identify what it is that I need to see Sally patient for by looking at the most recent labs that Sally patient has received since the last time I saw her, and identify quickly from that lab what values came in that are relevant to the chronic conditions that Sally patient has, and being able to identify those in my visit note quickly. And so this feature that allows us to match up problems and labs enables our physicians to save a lot of time.
Excellent. One last thing we leave the demo, Kyna, is that frequently all of the complaints have been around documentation and order entry. How do you solve the problems of either the copy and paste idea or the issue around having to dive into multiple parts of the different screens or menus to get orders done and that kind of stuff? That's been, I think, where a lot of the complaints about usability have come from. Do you have a sort of solution for that?
Yeah, I mean, the issues of usability and copy paste and documentation, I think the way those are addressed are really the results of many, many decisions within the product, but I can kind of show you maybe a couple things that get at that. So for example, you know, in the history section of this patient's clinical profile here, we've already documented a lot of information about the patient. We make it very easy to then export that information into the patient's note. And so this is one of the areas where, you know, a physician may have to type it again if they were in another system, and that creates documentation burden. Furthermore, if there was anything new that I was adding, say I was talking to the patient, it's something new in their past medical history, and maybe it's, you know, wisdom teeth removal. Then once I put it into the note, I'm actually very easily able to add it back to my history. So if I click, you know, add past medical history, it shows up back here automatically. So that's just an example of the principle that if something has been written in Elation already, we shouldn't make the doctor write that again.
Cool. So I think that gives people the now why don't you switch out of that and back to your video? I think that gives people watching this an idea about some of the new techniques and interfaces that are coming out, and one of the things that you've been working on, obviously over some years now, but certainly in terms of how to change the methodology there by which doctors are doing that. And tell me. I want to ask you about 4 things to close the interview. The first one is just give me a sense of the feedback you've had. Now you've got a decent user base, you've got these good net promoter scores. What are the kinds of things that when they've been using one of your Elation versus one of the previous EMRs they've used, what are the kind of things you hear most favorable comments about?
Yeah, I think that, you know, the comments we get most often are things like, one, the system thinks the way physicians think. I think that is something we hear. I think a second thing we hear is that we make it very easy for the physician to do what they need to do. So the system gets out of their way and lets them focus on patients. That's another kind of type of feedback, a positive feedback that we hear. And I think another type of feedback we get as well is that it saves them time. So they'll talk about how with the previous system, they would go home after work every day, need to spend a few hours finishing their notes and documenting, and how, you know, after switching to Elation, they don't need to do that anymore. So saving them time and giving them time back with their families.
Yeah, well, it'll be good depending on their family, right? Okay, it's Christmas, we have to be nice. So let's talk about a couple of things which I think are very important. And look, we're in a deeply uncertain political time. We're not entirely sure how things are going to play out next couple of years with the new administration. But we do know that macro is the law, and that there are going to be a lot of demands made, especially with all practices, but especially with small practices. We've heard some comments about people saying, even John Malamka saying it would be time to give up on small practice. Give me a sense about how does what you're doing, what Elation's doing, how does that help to doctors who are going to have to confront a whole series of new reporting requirements, whatever they might be?
Yeah, absolutely. So we see it as part of our responsibility and part of the vision of what, you know, we're doing as a product to be able to help physicians be successful in, you know, the value-based reimbursement environment and to assist in that transition. And so I think if we look more broadly at what value-based payment means, it means that the payers need a lot more information about what's happening at the point of care, and they want that information sent to them so that they can assess what's going on and essentially how much they should be paying. And I think the way that Elation fits into that is that we are at that point of care, and because it's an intuitive and easy to use system that physicians are actually using for decision making and actually engaging in at the point of care. In other words, not waiting till the end of day to type a bunch of things that they need, or trying to get somebody, you know, pawn the work off to somebody else so they don't have to interact with the system. Because we are at the point of care and engaging physicians there, we can really help with that whole need of on the one hand, payers to get the information that they're looking for to determine value-based payments, but on the other hand, physicians, enabling them to document the information and the data that payers want, but at the same time enabling them to focus on patients and deliver the care that ultimately is what everybody is trying to optimize for. And so I think technology is a huge role to play there to essentially abstract away the reporting requirements and burdens from the physicians. But at the same time, just make sure that there is that visibility so we can bend that cost curve, which is so much of what, legislation like MACRA is put in place to do, to move away from a fee-for-service system that, is driving inflation in healthcare costs and instead focusing on incentivizing and improving outcomes.
So that sounds good. That's one thing that doctors are dealing with. The other thing that doctors are increasingly having to deal with is the concept, whether you call it population health or patient engagement, or whatever you want to call it, of how do you manage the care of patients outside of that sort of 10 minutes or 20 minutes or however long they get in the exam room. And there's a lot of both communication systems with the sort of telehealth world, but also monitoring systems, not to mention all the wearables and whatever else that's going on. That's been a struggle, I think, the sort of communication between those types of systems, all the stuff we see at Health 2.0 and traditional EMRs, has been a struggle, not only around getting access to APIs and that kind of stuff. But I mean, how are you positioning and working with your clinicians around those issues? Because they're obviously going to be starting to be paid on that and have to pay attention to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a couple of things. So first, Elation is built as a modern cloud-based platform, and we have a comprehensive modern API that other third parties can either build upon or our customers can connect other systems to really bring complementary systems together and just get more power out of the technology that they have on hand. And while for folks outside of healthcare, that seems like a very simple thing, I think the set of EMRs that provide the access to data that we do is
low. I'll give you that. You probably saw we did a study on this last summer, and looking at the major players, and low would be a fair answer.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's something that we believe strongly in, and that it's enabling our customers and physicians and providers to be able to leverage the information in Elation. That's where they're going to get a lot of value. And so I think that's one part of it. You talked about population health, like that's in our minds, that's absolutely part of what we're doing at Elation. And again, our mission is to strengthen the relationship between patients and physicians, and that doesn't just happen within the four walls of the clinic, but it continues as the patient leaves the clinic, and especially in a world where physicians are more responsible for quote unquote value, but and what that means is it's not just what happens in the four walls, but what happens outside. So if you refer a patient to a podiatrist, a diabetic patient to a podiatrist to get their foot exam, you need to make sure the patient gets there. It's your job isn't just writing that referral. Or if you send them out to get labs, you need to make sure that happens and that they follow through with the treatments that you prescribe. It's not just, writing that script or writing that requisition. So, increasingly, healthcare is moving very much outside that traditional 15-minute office visit. And we recognize that. And we see that all as part of strengthening that relationship and that ability for a physician to quarterback the care of the patient. And so we absolutely are supporting that.
And in terms of I happened to be on another thread recently looking at the open notes issue. How, in terms of patient access to the clinicians to their own information, via Elation, where are you in that journey?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So our physicians are able to share anything in the patient record with their patients through our patient-facing platform. And it's interesting, there's such a diversity in physicians who share everything versus physicians who share the bare minimum. So they don't want to share their whole notes, they just want to share summaries. they're very selective about what they do. Some physicians really want to exchange messages virtually with their patients, and others, really don't want to do that. And so I think that our jobs from a technology perspective are to encourage and make as easy as possible and make as clear as possible the positive benefits to expanding patient access to this information and to engaging patients, but doing it in such a way that's sensitive to the challenges that physicians face in terms of liability or burden, information overload, and things like that. Those are real concerns, and it's important to think hard about those as we're trying to enable these new, obviously very positive modes of interaction that will benefit patients tremendously. So. Yeah.
So last question, if I was to, you're doing a lot, right? You're building a company, you basically built a company from scratch, building new technology from scratch, and you're going to a market that has been, that obviously, basically from before you were founded, got this big fillip of money and has now some very, very big players in it, and you're still a very small player. Having said that, tons of concern and dissatisfaction with the current incumbents. So if you look back here and say 5 years time, what does a good result for Elation look like? Do you expect it to be a wholesale changeover from sort of the old world EMRs to new cloud-based players like yourselves? Do you expect or is a good result for you to have grown as kind of a niche player and got a few more people on the system? What's your ambitions for where Elation can end up?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like Elation to be part of every interaction between a patient and a physician that happens. I think there is so much that's challenged and wrong with the solutions that are supporting those today. And I think that there's widespread benefit from that. So that's our ambition and our vision and sort of where we want to go. But I think that the vision is a little more practical too than saying we're going to walk up to every health system that's spent 9 digits of dollars on their Epic installations or Cerner or whatever that is, and saying like, hey, rip everything out. I think we have to be thoughtful about, hey, what are really the pain points and what is the value that we're providing, and how do we make that work and get that into the physician's hands without this, huge overhaul that might be perceived. And so at the end of the day, we want to be the tool that physicians feel enables them to provide the best possible care, because it makes it easier for them to do the things that they want to do, provides the information that's accurate and relevant, and helps them more effectively care for their patients. And I think that's something that the existing EMR incumbents are pretty much doing none of. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to fill in that gap.
Yeah, I think there's some editorial will be that there's a new generation of cloud-based and often that's sort of newly thought through EMR companies, yourselves, Modernizing Medicine will be in that bucket, Dr. Krohn will be in that bucket, who are trying to figure out, can you create a new interface that people can move on to? And you obviously have to figure out what you do with those sort of big legacy sort of ERP systems that are hiding behind those EMR interfaces at those big systems. And there's a big question, but clearly we're struggling with that interface now. I had a whole panel about this at Health about 2 years ago, and then seeing the other players like you mentioned earlier, can you get out of having to interface with the system? And you've got someone like Augmetics who's doing a Google Glass based method of actually getting people out of having to use the EMR by giving them some other function. So I think it's interesting to see how clinicians and doctors are going to deal with the future. And you're obviously well positioned if people are going to say, well, we need to go to a different type of EMR interface. And I think there's one way to grow. The other area is that we're going to see medical practices change, and you're not going to see these massive systems continue to have it all their own way. And things, people are looking for different types of providers, and there's going to be a heterogeneity of activity in healthcare, particularly around what types of provider organizations, and I use that very loosely. People are going to end up with. You're seeing growth of functional medicine, you're seeing retail medicine, you're seeing these smaller acute care centers, and and you're seeing a big growth of new types of provider organizational work sites and elsewhere. And it's not going to be what it looked like 10 years ago. In 10 years, it's just going to be a different or even looks like today. And I think that you're well positioned to attract those kinds of organizations, because you wouldn't want to start with something that looked like it was designed in 1987, which is what a lot of people have. So anyway, that's my little editorial at the end of your interview. I apologize for taking over, but that's where we are. Do you have any parting comments before I sign off?
No, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I mean, obviously, you have a lot of insight and perspective on this, having watched this industry for so many years, and so I appreciate the chance to chat. And and I think there's a lot of work to do, as we've talked about, and we're obviously working hard at that and have our sleeves rolled up doing that. And I just hope that more and more people get focused on these, because these are big problems at hand that affect all of us.
And you haven't regretted leaving Stanford and that cushy professorship yet. I won't ask that too hard. We'll get when you get into by Z-Dog, he'll tell you about his dad's preference about leaving university. Anyway, great. I've been talking with Kyna Fong. She's the CEO of Elation Health, about their new approach to looking at that whole thorny problem of the electronic medical record and how doctors document all of their care. So, thanks for your time, Kyna.
Thank you.